Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Deadhead Cannabis Show. I'm Larry Mishkin from Mishkin Law in Chicago, joined as always by my co-host, Rob Hunt of Lene Holdings out in San Diego, and our fearless producer, Dan Humiston, who it looks like this time is actually back in his place in Denver or out in the mountains somewhere. So, Dan, nice to have you along. Rob, what's going on?
Just hanging out in Southern California with crazy amounts of stuff happening in the cannabis industry these days. So lots to talk about this week, Larry.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of stuff going on. We're T-minus about a week and a half to MJ Biz, so everybody's getting really excited about that. We are hoping that we will be able to tape an episode of our podcast from MJ Biz. So for Chris Walsh and all our good buddies at MJ Biz who are listening, make sure we get our press passes, please, and we will be there to do our dazzling show and impress everyone. On today's show, we have another fun Grateful Dead concert that we're going to be talking about. And, it seems like I don't really even have to dig that hard to find special and unique shows. Today's is November 7th, 1971, 51 years ago today, for those of us who are bad at math on the spot. And it's from the Harding Theater in San Francisco. Let's just get right into the beginning, and you'll see that the Dead are out for a fun time this night. Dan, what do you got?
Now don't get all excited because we're still tuning up.
If you were sitting at home next to your radio, or if you are sitting at home next to your radio, you're hearing the music faster than you are if you're in the hall. That's an interesting but true.
We won't bore you with lengthy explanations of this phenomenon.
That sounds like it.
I would say that was about 432 cycles.
Is there anybody near a filter?
Oh, makes you howl like a hippie.
So, Rob, I got to tell you, the early 1970s, the late 60s, I love listening to these shows because you always get this hilarious onstage banter here among Jerry, Bobby, and Phil. They're laughing, they're joking it up, they're having fun. And maybe fans back in those days could take it for granted. But even by the time I started seeing shows in 1982, Jerry said practically nothing from the stage. Bobby would make a statement or two other than, we'll be back in a few minutes and thank you very much at the end of the night. And every now and then he might have something to say, but nothing like this. This is fun, right? This is fun listening to these guys have fun.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I took it for granted that I would never hear them speak on stage. And, once in a while after like a "We Want Phil" chant, Phil might say something like, why not "We want Mickey" or "We want, Bill." But that was about the most you got outside of, if there was a major technical issue on stage that, someone might say something about trying to fix something. But there was never any banter. There was never any joking on stage. And I think that mainly ended in the late 70s. So I feel like in a lot of ways we grew up in the wrong generation of stage banter. Now, the other side of that, and this is something I've always appreciated when I go see other bands, and I'm like, oh, just shut up and play your songs, is what I did see was just musicianship and working the craft rather than, trying to influence or have interaction with the audience. It was like, look, you came to watch us play our instruments and play music, and that's what we're going to do for you. So I'm not sure which one I appreciate more, but I agree. When I listen to these old 70s shows, it is so much fun hearing those guys having fun on stage together.
Right. In fact, I can almost probably say that the highlight of my Jerry Garcia talking on stage moment came in the midst of a we want Phil" chant. And Jerry stepped up to the mic and said, "You can't have him. He's ours." And we all thought, wow, that's great. Jerry's saying something. He's making a joke. And, it was wonderful. And, maybe it got to a point where it's just a business for him. Maybe it got to a point where it was just the sooner we play, the sooner we can get off and go do our thing or whatever. Or, maybe as they got a little bit older, they just got a little less playful. But I always like starting off a show like that when they come out and before you even really get started, they're just cracking it up with everybody. And the nice part about this is that this theater, the Harding Theater, located on Divisadero Street in San Francisco, it's an old Gothic building. It opened in 1926 as a movie theater and pretty much played movies until the 1970 or so. And then it transformed into this live music venue that could seat at most maybe 1,200 people. The Dead have only played there 2 times, and that was these 2 nights, November 6th, and then the night before this show we're featuring, and then the November 7th show. and it's just it's such a great place. It's so small, so intimate, and maybe that's also what brought out the Dead's banter. Is you can almost practically feel like they were talking to members of the audience with a crowd that small. That they could go ahead and they could do that. So it is fun. The music is great. Jerry at the time was calling themselves a saloon rock band, whatever that means, or saloon band rock. Whatever he meant when he said that. But I think we all have a pretty good idea of music that we've heard when we visited saloons over the time. And the other good part about this show is this is just less than a month after Keith joined the band in October, and less than 2 months before Donna's first show on New Year's Eve this year. So you could really say it's the beginning of the changing of the guard. On this show, we only get to do at most 5, maybe 1 minute clips of music. The band played over 31 songs in this show. We couldn't even get to most of it, but I think that the songs that we did get to are pretty reflective of it, and we'll be coming back to listen to a few more of these tunes in a couple of minutes.
Yeah. So again, I always think that there's probably not a venue in San Francisco the guys haven't played in, and we obviously talk about all the ones that are best known, but it's random. Like you forget that a lot of these cities, I always forget it when you walk down the street of any major city, that behind some of the doors that just look like, standard doors, there might be a 12 or 1,500 person venue there. And in New York City, I forget, the most. When you just walk down Broadway in general, you forget that, like, you're passing by all these marquees that Broadway plays, but behind those marquees is some beautiful theater that was opened up in the vaudevillian days, usually in like the early 1900s, that, someone's been keeping these places alive. And that's what, it's kind of a lost art. A lot of those theaters over the years have closed, but certain cities have managed to keep them alive. And London and New York being, the two primary ones. But there's still a handful of those great theaters in San Francisco. And that's one of the things I always loved about the Warfield this year. You're walking down Market Street. It looks like this nondescript kind of, building front. And then you walk in and you're like, where the hell did this come from? And I think it's terrific. I mean, Denver's still got quite a few of them in the Ogden Theater and the Gothic Theater and some of the other ones. There's, such cool rooms. In Chicago, where you are, I mean, the Avalon, there's a handful of just great rooms that, for me, like, my favorite way to see music is in those in those rooms, more than a shed, more than a stadium, more than a sports arena. But you go into a room that was designed for sound, designed to have people go watch a performance. It's the best way to see music.
Absolutely. And yes, kids listening at home, there was a time when the Grateful Dead could actually play in theaters that only held 800 to maybe 1,200 people. Long before their Soldier Field days and all the big sheds everywhere where they played, because the demand was so great, they had to be able to accommodate the people that wanted to see the show. But surely to have the opportunity to see them in one of these old small theaters at any time would have been fantastic. That's nice about some of the other bands, for instance, like Umphreys, which I think has a fairly good following, and I got tuned onto them a little bit this summer at the Sacred Rose, and now they're coming back to Chicago in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to be seeing them at the Riviera Nightclub, which is another one of these old-fashioned theaters that they've turned into a really great concert venue. I'm excited to be able to see them in that theater, and then in fact a week or two later we're seeing J-Rad in the exact same building. And, what a treat it is, really to be in there among a smaller crowd. You can really appreciate it, I think, a lot. And the music is amazing.
Yeah, and you just saw Tab a couple of days ago, Larry. So I'm guessing that was in a relatively small theater. How was the Tab show?
Tab was great. It was my first true Tab show. I had been previously, I'd seen Trey play a couple of times, but never in a Tab capacity, and was very happy to be able to do that. Was blown away by his band, one of the most amazing horn sections I've ever seen, with Jennifer Hartzman and Natalie Cressman.
I believe so. Yep, and Jennifer Hartswick. It's definitely Jennifer Hartswick, who's been with the band for years and years. And I've seen play probably at least 25 or 30 times in Burlington, Vermont, in a tiny little place called Red Square. She used to play solo shows. And she's a powerhouse. She's amazing.
She was amazing. They were both amazing. And what was amazing to me was all of a sudden I'm sitting there and they're not playing the horns and they're singing. And not just singing, but singing with amazing singing voices, totally filling in, adding a whole nother dimension, not just the powerful horns that they brought, but fantastic voice. What a great band. The bass player, I didn't even catch his name, but he was standing way, way, way in the back off. But you couldn't basically see him all night, but you could hear him, and his presence was amazing. 2 drummers. I'm like, wow, I love this about Trey. He just surrounds himself with such amazing musicians, that it was really such a treat to be able to see him in that kind of a venue and to see that. And then the show was fantastic. And for me, truly, I think the best part about it was that there was enough Fish songs that they played that I was actually able to, to keep track with all of that and enjoy that so much. I didn't know the Trey songs quite as much as I would have liked to, but certainly I'm very happy to have gotten to hear the ones that I did. And it's kind of like a new experience. I think it's definitely, as we talked about before, not unlike going to see a Jerry band show, right? Because it's all Trey all the time. So when he's playing opening with Ghost or playing Everything's Right, that's great. Roll Like a River, I actually heard a couple of times because I've caught that on the radio. Ocelot I've heard before. And then he played Shine, which made me laugh because I bought that album 15 or 20 years ago when it came out as a solo album. And we saw him play Shine at Vegas back in 2006. So it was fun to hear that. But what was really amazing was after 2 full sets, they walked off the stage for a minute, came back on. Trey came back on, threw on his acoustic guitar and, cranked out Theme from the Bottom, Chalk Dust Torture, and more. So absolutely amazing. And then we're all clapping, thinking he's done. Then he picks up his electric guitar and the band came back out and they closed out with First Tube. So for a show that started at about 7:30, 7:45, he played till 11:25, brought the house down. My buddy and I had a great time, had a good meal before, great show. And after all of that, we still got out in enough time to catch the 10th inning of the first game of the World Series at a local watering hole and got to see that amazing finish. So all in all, it was a great night. My advice to anyone is if you have a chance to see Trey, go see him.
Yeah, coming up here pretty soon, your chances to go see Trey with with Goose. For all those that didn't see it, Goose just got their late night first appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live the other night. So, if you had a chance to do that, go check it out on YouTube. You can certainly find it. But Kimmel's opening of introducing Goose is pretty funny. It's saying, all my friends that eat mushrooms have been telling me to see this band, and, they're right. So, and then the whole audience started just, sort of chanting Goose. And Kimmel's like, those aren't boos. That's them chanting Goose. But, it's great to see some of these young bands getting a fair amount of attention, not just with other musicians, but with the mainstream as well. So, hats off to Goose, and going to see Tab and Goose together, I think should be a hell of a lot of fun come up here in the next couple of weeks.
I agree. My son's going to check out one of the shows on the East Coast, so I'm all set to get a great update from him as well. The other thing about this show, though, that I learned that I guess I just, not part of the Fish culture enough to know, but we walked by the theater on our way to dinner probably an hour and a half before they said they were going to be opening the doors. And there was a line of people around the building. And we asked somebody why, and they said because they were selling Pollock posters. I didn't know what a Pollock poster was till it was explained to me that he does work for the band, or maybe more for Trey, and that whatever his poster was, his specially created poster for Chicago, they were selling just a limited number of them for $50 or $60, but they would soon be worth $1,000, and everybody wanted to get their hands on it. We went off to eat and came back later, and the line was gone, and the posters, of course, were all sold out. I did have a chance to see what one looks like online, and they look really nice, but I'm not used to that kind of thing. My feeling is if you're going to a concert, just sell posters to the fans who are anybody who goes who wants to buy a poster. Why not? Otherwise they're creating the collection culture that drives prices up for the common guy.
Yeah, but I mean, like Jim Pollock is like so intertwined into like Fish's culture. I mean, in many ways that if you think about the way Chris Kuroda is as a light man, or you think about, the way that I'm spacing his name that's written all of Trey's songs, like there's so many people that are surrounding Fish's community, and Jim Pollock is certainly one of those people. In the same way that like Mouse or Kelly would have been for the Grateful Dead, right? So you kind of have to have the artisans surrounding you that kind of make it tick. Which, by the way, is a great segue into, I don't know if you saw this, but Garcia's pipe was just recovered. It was one of Owsley Stanley's old creations that was discovered in Merle Saunders' house and sold to a collector. But you want to talk about a great story of an artist and an artisan who is closely intertwined with a band. Owsley, you can talk about his belt buckles, you can talk about the marching bears, you can talk about all the other things he created. But the fact that he created a spirit pipe for Garcia, and then it resurfaces, and obviously there's all sorts of questions about the dubiousness of the authenticity. But the story appears to be verified. Rolling Stone just did an article on it, and I know you had a chance to check that out. But what'd you think?
Look, I think it's great, and as a guy who still prefers to combust, as the kids say, I definitely understand the importance of having a good piece. Everybody needs one. And back in the day when they were all wood and they'd always, eventually kind of get all messed up, and now it's glass and the little glass screens and trying to keep up with that. But none of this surprises me. It doesn't surprise me that Owsley Stanley would manufacture pipes, make them. He was that kind of guy. He could easily have the skills and the talent to do it. And it doesn't surprise me that he would do it as a spirit pipe. It's great that he gave it to Garcia. It's great that the story goes Garcia was the only one who ever smoked out of it. And then it disappeared off the face of the earth. I had never heard about it before this story. I'd never heard Deadheads talk about it. I'd never heard Big Steve talk about it. I'd never heard Jerry talk about it. But the story goes that a little while ago, when he was cleaning out his house, Merle Saunders moved a bed from against a wall, and wedged up between the mattress and the wall was this pipe. And they found it, and nobody could believe it. And there is a collector's community out there, and they dived into it. And what I like is the quote was, "It still smells like weed." So, maybe that's just a little embellishment to make a good story even better. But hey, as a guy who loves Jerry and has gotten high many a time out of a good pipe listening to the Grateful Dead play, I like that story.
Yeah, I do too. And I thought what was more interesting was it wasn't actually Merle, it was Merle's son, right? So Merle passed in 2008. And so that's where I was like, okay, this is some bullshit story where his kid's like, oh yeah, man, that was Jerry's pipe, and you could just say anything at that point because there's no one to verify it. And that's where the person that actually bought it, not knowing necessarily how authentic it was, did enough sleuthing around and was able to actually verify that, in fact, Owsley Stanley did, in fact, make this pipe, and I think made it while he was in prison after his LSD bust. And it was, a spirit pipe with kind of the spirit animal. And the thing that was really cool about it, some of the engravings in there was, the Cats Done Under the Stars engraving was on there, and there was another engraving on there that Owsley would have had to figure out, how to get these tools, in a place where it's not that easy to find tools. So, the entire story, again, I could find something behind my bed and be like, oh yeah, that was so-and-so's, that's been passed for the last 15 years. But to actually put the pieces back together and do the sleuthing, that's where I thought the story was super cool. And, the fact that Merle's kid was like, yeah, Jerry used to come over here, and this is when they were making Blues in the Rainforest together. And this is the pipe that Jerry smoked out of, and no one else ever smoked out of it. And I don't know whether that was because maybe other things besides cannabis were smoked in that pipe, or whether or not it was, specifically because it was just a reason that was his and he only, used it. But the fact that it was long lost behind what sounded like a Murphy bed of some sort, is I love stories like that just because they're fun.
Me too. And I'm a sucker for that kind of trivia and arcane knowledge. And I think the other design, that one was, you're right, the Cats Under the Stars. The other one was the tiger that was the same design that was eventually put on his guitar. So, I find it hard to believe that, somebody else would casually be walking around with a handmade pipe with all that stuff on there. So, I'm going to vote in favor of legit. And if nobody in the Garcia family has come forward to disabuse us of that notion, then I think that that's a great story. And yeah, it's fun. And I think what it does is it just normalizes Jerry a little bit more for Deadheads, right? We all have our pipes. We can all relate to what it means to have your favorite pipe, or one that you really like smoking out of. And Jerry had one too, and you can also relate to the fact where you've put one down, usually, because you've used it too much and you have no idea where you put it down. And now you're prepared to have to move on without it. And what can be better than, a few weeks later stumbling and saying, look what I found under the couch, or, wherever it might be. So
my favorite pipe still resides with our buddy Matty Veach, who's come on the show before. And Matty's now on Leftover Salmon Tour and just ran the stage for the Halloween shows down in Sewanee, Florida. But my favorite pipe in the world, he's been carrying around with him for about the last 15 years. And he always jokes around. He's like, well, if you want, I'll send it back. And I was like, nah, man, use it far more than I would. I'm like, just don't break it, because it's an old Bob Snodgrass shop pipe that was made by Bob Batram and Cameron that, at some point, you want to talk about something that's got value like a Jim Pollock poster, that the earliest days of the Snodgrass shop, a lot of those pipes now are absolute collector's items. So there's part of me that's like, I want that thing back, but I never use it. I just want to know that I have it, so in case I ever want to do something with it. But then I'm like, yeah, pipes are meant to be smoked out of. So if there's someone that's that's still using it, I'd rather the Veach have it than me. And I don't think the Veach is using it. I think he's gone sober now, so I don't even know who's getting the benefit of that pipe. So.
Sure. And it's great fun, and you take good care of your pipe, make sure it's all nice and clean. Always, you got to be able to impress somebody else with it. But here's my question for you, as long as we're talking pipes for a minute. Were you a grind it up first and then pour it in guy, or were you just pull a little bit off the bud and stuff it in there?
I was a pork the tip and jam it in the top of the pipe. No, I didn't grind. I didn't even hit the grinding until I moved to British Columbia briefly. And I was watching all these guys use coffee grinders to like grind for their joints, and they're all using twist grinders to twist their pipes. No, I was the guy that would just like pork a tip of the nug off the top and just jam it right in there.
Yeah, certainly we've all gone that route when circumstances command. But I figured out a long time ago that if I ground it up and used it that way, that you were actually you could get better mileage out of it, right? You didn't have to like wind up with maybe half a bud that was kind of burned through but not really quite used. And when you grind it up. But on the other hand, when you grind it up, I think it's kind of hard. You lose track of how much you're really smoking because it's more in there than what would appear to be. But, just one of those things where, I think anytime you find a guy who's a marijuana pot smoker, you have through a pipe, you have to find out whether they grind or stuff.
Yeah. So I always had the mantra of if I sold enough weed, it really didn't matter how much I smoked. So, there was always more. So, keep stacking. It didn't really much matter. Nowadays I think it's you take a little more nuanced approach as you get older.
I can't disagree with that for sure. So yeah, just so much of that fun stuff going on. And I got to tell you, this is a little bit why I'm kind of late to the party, but I'm going to MJ Biz this year. And besides the fact that we'll be taping a podcast there, if we haven't said it already, is because I just like. It's been a long time since I've been in a group that large of so many like-minded people. Benzinga here was nice. But MJ Biz is, you could basically anybody on the street in Las Vegas you bump into is more or less there for that conference. And it's just such a great opportunity to see old friends, to tell old stories, to talk about this kind of stuff. And so I'm very excited to get out there and see a lot of the old crew, some of the Hoban folks, maybe even Mr. Hoban himself. Heck, anybody who's going to make their way out to Las Vegas. We'll look forward to seeing as many as we can. You'll be there too, will you not, Rob?
I will. I just booked my tickets today, but we'll see. I've got meetings pretty well stacked up, and most of them are away from the conference. But I always look forward to it, as you said, to see old friends, and it's usually some good dinners and some good lunches, and always interesting conversation. But I find the entire thing. I find Las Vegas in general overwhelming. I'm not a huge fan of Las Vegas. I'm not a huge go out late and party, and I'm definitely not like your strip club guy. So that's not really my scene. But as far as taking in some of the other stuff, as far as like the restaurants and the music, I'm all for it, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. And for 24 to 48 hours, I usually have a good time there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think those are definitely the things that attract me more when I'm in Las Vegas. My standard line is I'll just walk into the casino, pull out $100 bill, and set it on fire, and then I've lost my money, but much faster, and I don't have to sit there and stress as my misplay my hands, not being a very good card player. But there's a few people in the crowd that I'll be hanging out with that like to do that. So inevitably I wind up venturing in and looking around and trying to figure out what number I can play on roulette, because at least I understand what's going on. But it will be a nice time. I'm looking forward to getting back there and actually spending a little bit of time this year in the convention center for a change. So hopefully if we see anybody out there, please come up and say hello, and we'd love to talk to you. Turning back for a minute to this concert of ours, one of the things about this show that really caught my eye, again, we're talking about November 7th, 1971 from the Harding Theater in San Francisco, is that 4 songs into it, the Dead break out a tune called Hideaway. It's an instrumental tune by bluesman Freddie King from back in the day. To say the least, the boys kill it. They just do an amazing job of it. The records on this are hard to track down, but the story that I'm generally seeing is that they only played this song twice on this occasion, and that one more time in 1989, they broke it out at Shoreline. So just as an aside, and note to myself and note to us to schedule, I'll have to reach out to our good but mysterious friend Alex Wellens, because he was probably at every Shoreline show there ever was, and he might be able to fill us in on that. But this is just this is a great tune. Why the band decided to play it this night and then not play it for another 18 years, I can't tell you. But Dan, go ahead and let's listen to Jerry and the boys do a little bluesmanship. Well, that was a lot of fun to listen to. I really, really enjoyed that. And, what's so nice is not just that you've got Jerry, kind of fronting what's become a blues band all of a sudden and really, playing with that rhythm like a true blues master. You've got Keith, the new guy in the band, who's playing a honky tonk organ. And, just as I picked that part of the song because I really wanted to hear Keith laying it out like that. Everybody talked about in the reviews of the show, and there's actually an entire article if you want to go online, if you're really interested in why the Dead play certain tunes. And there's a huge article on this Hideaway tune. I mean, when they talk about it, and even in the comments on the show, people just say that they think that once Keith joined the band, Jerry felt like he finally had a guy with the right kind of keyboard chops to be able to take it out for a ride. Or maybe he just decided to play it that night and Keith was able to keep up and play along. But it was great. And if you missed it, like I say, you had to wait 18 years to catch it at Shoreline. And if you missed it then you missed it. That was it. So, you can talk about being on the bus, you can talk about being off the bus, but sometimes you have to be in the front row of the bus if you really want to see everything. And, this is probably one of those occasions.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably only about 4 or 5 people that saw both Hideaways, and those people were all on stage. So
Yep.
I don't think there's too many people that can say they saw either one of them, much less both of them.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, but it will be interesting to see if Alex knows that. And as long as I've mentioned his name, I do have to let you know that when I was at the Trey show, he was at the Philoween show, the Friday night show of Halloween weekend, with his wife Andy, and we were texting back and forth, and he was telling me about that show, and it sounded really, really good. And I'm talking about our show, and it was funny because at that moment, I said to him, "Oh my goodness, there's all of these women playing horns and how good they are, and this is just so amazing. You should really come and hear them because they play, then they sing." And he turns to me and he says out of nowhere, basically the exact same thing. Or he said, "Oh, Jennifer and Natalie, yeah, they're really great." And of course, I'm like, come on. No, Alex knows everything. He knew who they were. He had heard them play before. So we will get him on the show because anybody who knows music that well can't be kept from the public forever.
Yeah, no doubt. And I don't know if you saw the set list from the 31st from those Phil and Friends shows, but it's insane. And I've yet to watch the full video because I keep getting tied up with something else. But to end the show, they played A Help Slip, A Memory of Elizabeth Reed, Franklin's Tower, Blue Sky, and just fused Grateful Dead and Allman Brothers together. And supposedly it's just amazing. So I've got to check that out.
Well, I think they had Dwayne Betts on stage with them that night.
Yeah, I think that's I've got to look at who was in the band that night, but yeah, there's certainly Allman Brothers members that were there.
And I heard that they closed with Werewolves.
They did. Yep, they played Werewolves as the encore after the Blue Sky. So that whole set was pretty fun.
That's why I say if you really want to go with just experience, crazy throwdown, Grateful Dead, rock and roll spirited stuff, you got to go see Phil at the Capitol Theater. No dissing Bobby, no dissing Wolf Brothers or Dead and Co. or any of that. But when Phil's playing in that cozy little joint, and that's exactly the type of theater that we're talking about here, although probably a little bit larger than the Harding. But nevertheless, what a great place. And any Deadhead who wanted to see, really experience what the Grateful Dead was like, go see these guys, because Phil always has such talented lineups on stage with him. It's something everybody should experience at least once. So at any rate, we had a good time texting back and forth. We were both enjoying our shows and how unique it is for the Grateful Dead back at that time, while they're kind of going through this shift in the type of music that they play. But it's never a full shift, is it, Rob? And, if you walked in at a certain point, you might be forgiven for thinking that, in fact, it was still 69 or 70, because shortly thereafter, the boys drop into a dark star that's absolutely incredible for so many reasons. It's a relatively short one by Dead standards. It's listed at 15 minutes, but there's 1 minute of pre-song noodling, so it really only boils down to about 14 minutes. This has to be one of the first ones that Keith has ever played with them. And if you're ever looking, if somebody ever says to you, hey, can you recommend a dark star where Phil just kind of takes it over? This is that one. He just has a great time. And it really seems to me that this is the kind of show and this is the kind of music, you'd be wanting, and making sure you have some of that new hot polka dot psilocybin infused chocolate bars that are going around and making a big scene right now, because, well, go ahead and play it, Dan, and you'll hear why. This is just a great dark star. Well, there, Rob, that's what I was referring to. A couple of times in there where Phil just boom, 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 boom all the way through. And, there were some nights where Phil really wanted people to know that he was making his presence felt on stage. There was other nights where maybe he'd take more of a secondary role. But this was certainly a night where Phil decided to let it all hang out.
Yeah, for sure. And then, as you said, as we were coming on to air, we cover Dark Star relatively frequently on the show. We definitely talked about the Miami '89 Dark Star, or Miami '88, I guess, Dark Star just the other day. Or no, '89, sorry. And this is such a juxtaposition, because they're so different. You look at what they were doing in 1971 for Dark Stars versus what they were doing in '89. In some ways, it's actually really fun to cover the same song 3, 4, 5 times in a row, because you really get to see the difference in how they were played during different eras. But this one, as you said, it's Phil thumping, full tilt through it, with just a much, much different feel to it than what you were getting in the stars that came back after '89.
Are you ready to make a career change? Is cannabis your passion? Find the right job at a great cannabis company today with a free account at Vangst.com. Vangst has spent years developing relationships with the world's top cannabis companies. So whether looking for a temporary gig at major festivals like Outside Lands or a C-level position with large MSO, Vangst makes it easy. Simply upload your resume and credentials at Vangst.com to connect with companies directly, or talk to one of their expert recruiters. It's all free through the Vangst platform. So what are you waiting for? Get the career you've always wanted by signing up for your free account at Vangst.com. That's VANGST.com, and learn why so many people are proud to work in cannabis. I think that's true. And look, by '89, it was a different era. Jerry was a different guy. They were all a lot older. And, I'm sure that they addressed the song, differently, and they went after it differently. But that's the beauty of Dark Star, and for every person who's out there and like, well, it's just a lot of, weird noises and a couple of strange lyrics, if they even bother to think it. But, to me, Dark Star is the epitome of living, breathing Grateful Dead, right? This is their ultimate vehicle for doing what they want to do, more so than even like a Viola Lee blues or, a plane in the band jumping off into, an hour of noodling or whatever. This was organized chaos. And how they approached that organized chaos differed by, you know, where in time they were and where they were, you know, in their careers, where they were age-wise, where they were everything. And, you know, it's no surprise, I guess, you know, back in 1971, you know, they were really at the top of their game. You know, the age-wise, they were peaking, health-wise, they were peaking, popularity-wise, they were peaking. And I'm glad that it motivated them in these ways to, you know, produce this wonderful music and these great memories of them just going out and really having a great time before it became a job, before it became a chore, before Jerry had to worry about whether anything he said on stage might wind up in some homemade, you know, prayer book with him on the cover, you know, as the omnipotent king of the universe kind of thing. And you know, the beauty of Dark Star is that every time they play it, they can play it however they want, and people still love it.
Yep, without a doubt. And it's you know, the one thing that you're assured of is you have absolutely no idea what you're getting when it starts. You know, it's you know what the verses are going to be, but you have no idea what the exploration is going to be.
This is very true. Just turning away for a moment here, because we could stay on this show and dead-related stuff the whole time. And the last couple of times we've hit the marijuana very hard, but let's go back and hit it again if we shall. A lot going on. We have an election coming up now tomorrow. This election is tomorrow, folks. So if you're listening today, please vote. I will not tell you how to vote. I wouldn't even suggest to you how to vote, because how you vote is none of my damn business, but vote. And actually, I'll take that back. It is my damn business if we're talking about marijuana initiatives, because literally this is my business. So please vote. And if you are in a state where there is a adult use ballot measure, please vote for it. Even if you don't smoke, even if marijuana is not your thing, think of the people for who it is. And, you know, if you need to go back and, you know, listen to some of our prior shows and, you know, get a true understanding for why all of these stories, just listen to what Mason Tvert was telling us when he was on the show, and go back and read his book and understand and be convinced that this is okay. I hear stories about somebody who's getting ready to open, and it turns out that there's an ice cream store a few doors down, and the ice cream store person won't have it. So rather than fight, they're moving, but they're only moving a couple of blocks away. Look, I can understand, I guess, if you're an ice cream store and you're serving small kids from time to time, you don't want to necessarily have a marijuana store there, but that kind of presupposes that the marijuana store is a bad thing, right? And it imagines that the people who go there are going to be bad people and aren't going to be the kind of people that young children should be exposed to, which is kind of funny, because all the people that young children are exposed to, not all of them, but I'm sure, you know, a measurable percentage of them have tried marijuana from time to time. And, you know, if it's going to really become part of our society, it should be part of our society. It should be independent of whether any one particular person smokes or doesn't smoke. And, you know, I hope that all of these are going to pass. It's looking like very close calls in Arkansas, Missouri, and South Dakota. Arkansas, who the hell knows what goes down there? Missouri's my home state, and I was still surprised they got medical. But I understand that there's a push for it. But Missouri politics are so crazy, there's no telling what'll happen. And South Dakota is Kristi Noem, so I'm not even touching that one with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that getting out there and voting and exercising your right to vote, I'm a firm believer, is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing that you're granted and afforded as a right as an American citizen. And, you know, not to sound sensationalist, but, you know, if you don't go out and vote this time, you can't really complain about what might happen about your right to vote next time. So, you know, I'm a true believer that this is probably the single most important election of our lifetime, and it certainly is setting the stage for, you know, the next presidential election. So, you know, if cannabis is what gets you to the polls and that's what motivates you, then by all means go out there and vote. If it's, you know, some other topic that you hold dear, you know, by all means go out and vote for that as well. But it is, you know, very, very important that you know, take the time to exercise that right, as is the fundamental sort of bedrock of our democracy. So I know that if I was in any of those states, you know, look, if we can actually pass 5 more states with adult use, which I'm not sure we can, but if we can, that opens up 16 million more people that have access to adult use cannabis in this country. That's not a meaningful number when you look at it in terms of some of the larger state populations that we have, you know, compared to a California or a Texas or a Florida. But when you think about, you know, sort of where the tipping point is in changing federal legalization in general, adding 16 million people in a country of, you know, 330 million people is material. You know, that's it's not quite, you know, it's about 4% of our population that we're adding. And every time you add a few more percent, it makes a difference. It makes a difference politically. It makes a difference in public sentiment. It makes a difference in the people's lives that aren't getting arrested or incarcerated for this anymore. You talk about an ice cream store being next door. I mean, I'd challenge, which one is the greater harm? Which one, causes more long-term issues? If you're eating ice cream all day or smoking bong hits all day, jury's out. And as, Mason Tvert pointed out with respect to the comparison to alcohol, cannabis is safer, and I'm still the first one to tell you that. As a person that consumes much more alcohol than I do cannabis, I still know that when I do that I'm choosing the more evil of the two substances. It's, everyone's got their personal choice of what to consume. But either way, I'd never want to see anyone incarcerated for alcohol consumption any more than I'd ever want to see someone incarcerated for cannabis consumption. So, if you're a cannabis user, and I suspect that everyone that listens to our program is, get out there. Get out there and vote if you're in South Dakota. Get out there and vote if you're in Missouri. Get out and vote if you're in any of these other states. Or even if you're seeing incremental change. And there's a measure on the California ballot right now about where to allocate tax dollars, from cannabis. And, again, is it just one more person with their hand in the pocket of our industry that's just causing the industry to collapse right now? We need to get people out there that are not just talking about legalization, but how to improve the legislation that's already on the books in a lot of these states. So that's all I've got on my stump speech as far as elections go. But it makes life a hell of a lot easier when you have laws in front of you that work with what your lifestyle is and what you choose to do. And, at this point, it's no secret that a lot of Americans consume cannabis. So let's protect them when they're doing it. Let's make it safe. Let's make it regulated. And let's take the stigma away from it.
Well said. And I would go a step further, and I would say, if you're out there with people and you hear people dissing marijuana, again, whether you're a user or not a user, call them out, set the record straight, tell people to go read about what they're talking about. This doesn't have to be words spread through people and, we all result into the lowest common denominator, as it seems we too often do in this country these days. And speak up for this right. If it's not this right, it's going to be somebody else's right for something else. And this is a good right to have. It's a good right to be available for people. I'll go a step further, Rob, and my wife, unfortunately, gets upset when I say this, but that's okay. I'll say it anyway. I think you can make an argument that marijuana is the safest thing that human beings can consume. You can eat too much and die. You can drink too much and die. You can consume too much alcohol and die. There's so many things you could put in your body and die, but no matter how much marijuana you smoke, it's not going to cause you to have an overdose because it can't cause you to have an overdose. So, I don't think we have to quite take it to that extreme. But the point is that if we're going to talk about comparative safety among items that we're going to let adults use for purposes of relaxation and intoxication, anybody who wants to tell you otherwise is lying if they're not going to say that this really is the safest and healthiest, if you want, way to do that and be able to relax with everyone. And that would be nice to be able to do. And, look, it's getting easier and easier, right? A couple of weeks ago, we talked about Florida and Circle K. Now in Toronto, Rob, we've got Uber Eats and Leafly. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to happen. I mean, it wasn't a question of when this happened. You're going to start seeing bigger and bigger industries get involved in the space. And as they feel safer, doing so, we've talked about it a lot as far as, the normalization of cannabis. Uber Eats is a natural one. And I think everyone's been waiting to see whether or not Uber Eats enters the U.S. market when they can. And I think that, the largest delivery companies have always been fearful of, either Amazon or some other company like an Uber Eats that already has the logistics and already has the platform built to be able to service the consumer base. I mean, there's certain businesses that if they want to come in and swoop into the cannabis market, it's almost impossible to prevent them from doing it. So am I surprised they're doing it in Canada? No, I'm not. And I think that's going to, make for a very, very efficient way to procure cannabis. And I can't wait till I'm ordering eights by drone. I don't think we're all that far off at this point. So do I think we're going to see more, big industry get involved? Yeah, I do. And I think at every possible level you are.
I think that's true. It's nice to see. It's nice to see that they're partnering with a company that is well established, and everybody knows who Uber Eats is, for God's sakes. And that a company like Uber Eats, just like an organization like Circle K, their willingness to reach out and partner up with businesses in the cannabis industry is what's moving this forward, is what's normalizing things for people. And that's a wonderful thing. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. If I can order a dinner and have it delivered right to my front door, why can't I order a couple of joints or half an ounce of my favorite strain and have it delivered to my door? And we can talk about it all we want. And, back in the day, well, look, Domino's Pizza, wouldn't it be cool if there was somebody who would deliver marijuana too? Well, 40 years later, here it comes. So I'm all for it and very excited to see. I hope it's all successful everywhere, and that other states are willing to accommodate these types of businesses and let them modernize cannabis to the next level.
Me too, and I hope it happens before the wheels come off this industry any more than they already are. And some of the other news we're seeing coming out this week is, again, more kind of doom and gloom, especially in the California market of companies not being able to service their debt stacks and restructurings that are becoming increasingly difficult. And I think that, the next MJ Biz conference, if you were to say what the overarching theme is going to be of a lot of the people you listen to on those panels, is, how do we stay in business? How do we survive? How do we get through, 2023? I know an article was just put out talking about the defaults that are happening largely to some of the larger REITs that hold the real estate of these companies. Most recently, Kings Garden defaulting on a $2.3 million note payment, or $2.3 million note, I should say, that they owed to Innovative Industrial Properties, which is a San Diego-based REIT. And I can tell you that they're not the only ones. Like if you were to look at IIP's balance sheet over the last year and you were to look at the write-downs they've had, for them, like they've created a business model that works very, very nicely and throws off a lot of cash so long as the groups that they're funding or if they're buying the real estate for are able to service the notes. And I'll tell you that the IIP is there's a fair amount of counterparty risk with a lot of things they've done. They've had a lot of other previous write-downs that they've had to suffer through. So, on one side, they charge a pretty high coupon to give people capital, but on the other side, they have to balance that against the risk of default. So it's tricky, and part of the risk of default is people lending at these outrageous prices. So IIP's business is a little bit different. It's mostly sale leasebacks, where they'll buy the real estate of these companies and then lease it back to them. But they lease it back to them at a cap rate that's significantly higher than market. And that makes it very difficult as a lessee to make sure you're making those payments. And I can tell you that IIP holds the real estate of a lot of the biggest companies in this space. So keep an eye on this one. It's not just IIP. It's a lot of the other groups that are doing sale leasebacks on real estate as well. They all saw this great opportunity saying, well, banks aren't going to hold your mortgage, so we'll hold it. And then the other big question is, how the hell did they get away with listing on the NASDAQ when their entire business model is predicated on lending to cannabis-based businesses, yet a cannabis-based business doesn't have that same ability to list on the same exchange? So we're watching that space closely right now as Canopy is trying to do their deal right now. As we talked about last week, the NASDAQ is saying no to that transaction, but the TSX up in Toronto is saying yes. So, is there a creative solution now for American-based or American-domiciled cannabis-based businesses to start listing on an exchange that's significantly better than the CSE or the OTC markets in the U.S. and start getting on the TSX by replicating this creative structure that the guys over at Denton's, multinational law firm, has put together, that they think they've cracked this nut. They think there's a formula here. And if there is, I think you'll be watching people rush to the TSX replicating the same ring-fenced formula that Denton's has created for Canopy.
Well, look, I'm far from an expert on that kind of stuff, and appreciate that you are. But one of the things I can't help but take out of all of this is that there's so many people out there who just naturally assume that anybody with a dispensary license or a cultivation license is printing money. We know that not to be true, and we've talked about that quite a bit. But I wonder how hard it is, for the average person to truly sit there and say, what's wrong with this industry? Everybody talks about how marijuana sales are up. There's always lines at the dispensaries. There's so much going on. How can it be that this is what the situation is? And well, we know the answer, because you can't deduct your ordinary business expenses, and you can't get operating funds from anywhere except going on a private market and probably paying rates that are significantly higher than what you would have to pay if you could walk into a bank and get a standard operating loan like any other business can. And far be it from me to tell lenders what their interest rates should be, but certainly people who want to get into the cannabis industry and want to attempt to grow their business have to face this reality that unless they are independently funded and have their own means to do it, they're going to have to turn to this market of private lenders, and have to see what happens. By the same token, it seems to me that on the private lenders side, there's some real thinking that has to go on too, right? On the one hand, you can say, look, we're here, we can take advantage of this like nobody's business. What a perfect time. They can't get loans from banks. They have to come to us. We have a captive audience, and we can really do that. But at the same time, I would like to think that there's a little pushback that says, yeah, but we don't want these guys all to default. Or maybe they do, I don't know. But right, I mean, it's one thing to say I can charge whatever interest rate I want. It's another thing to charge an interest rate that's respective of who you're dealing with in the industry they're in. And I would have to think that in the long run, a client who survives and can pay back their entire loan and keep their business operating has to be far more valuable to a lender.
Yeah, I mean, there's always that old mantra of, are you loaning to help a business or is it loan to own? And, what I'll say is in the cannabis industry, a lot of the lenders are finding out that they can't loan to own. You certainly can't lend and secure against the license. It's not transferable in most states, or at least not forced transferable. Most of these banks, most of these lending groups don't want to be on a license anyway. They certainly can't secure against the inventory, because now they're holding, a Schedule 1 narcotic. So, do these guys want that exposure? They don't. So essentially they're securing against real estate and they're securing against equipment, and then, whatever else they can, legally secure against. But oftentimes your security is grossly undervalued by comparison to the amount that's lent. So, you're under securitized coming out of the gate. They think the best way to handle that is to put on, excessive, fees and excessive coupons to a lot of these notes. And ultimately, then, as you said, all you're doing is exacerbating the issues for the group you're lending to. And if it causes them to fail, everyone loses. And I think a lot of lenders are realizing that right now, and they don't have the same ability to be as predatory as they might be in other industries as a result thereof. So it's tricky. It's a tricky industry right now. I advised a group this morning, an old buddy of mine from law school had a client of his call me this morning about raising capital in the space, and I spent 45 minutes and I'm sort of walking him through every pitfall that is out there. And this is a guy that, has a successful business already and is trying to grow it. And, I was like, come on, man, like, you know what you're facing off against right now. Is this really the time that you want to be aggressive, or is this the time that you actually want to be opportunistic, raise some capital, wait it out, weather the storm. If you're running a successful location now, you don't need to swing for the fences. There's plenty of opportunities going to come simply by watching the attrition from a lot of these undercapitalized businesses that are unfortunately at death's door right now. So, again, cautionary tale to all would-be cannabis operators out there. It is not nearly as rosy as one thinks, and it is a absolute grind out there right now. It's the toughest market I've ever seen.
Well, that may not be the news that everyone wants to hear, but it is the news. And, certainly come to MJ Biz or go out to other conferences or start reading up on it to get a better feel for this, or just listen to the Deadhead Cannabis Show. And we're happy to educate you and update you as much as we can and to keep you coming back. I don't want to stray too far away from where we started out with all of our good Grateful Dead stuff and a lot of good music news. And we're not a political show, and we're really not a political show. And I don't view this as being a political statement. I view this as being a statement that any decent human being would make, and would hope that anybody out there, regardless of their political stripes or colors, would be able to understand that and make the same type of statement. But I certainly want to wish Paul Pelosi a very quick and safe return to good health. What happened to him is unspeakable. If it had happened to a Republican, it would have been unspeakable. And the fact that there are certain people who choose to take this opportunity to not only degrade Mr. Pelosi, but also to degrade many members of the gay and lesbian communities by suggesting that this was nothing more than a homosexual dalliance gone bad, is so far below what any decent human being should do, that it seems to me that should be a disqualifier, not just from politics, but basically from life. So sorry to get on my soapbox for a minute, but I just can't help but say, regardless of who you want to vote for president, regardless of whether you think taxes should be up or down, regardless of any of that, can we at least just have enough respect to be able to say to somebody who was badly beaten by a robber who broke in, and there's video so everybody can prove how the guy got in and that he wasn't already there, like President Trump has suggested was the case. Let's drop that stuff and let's just all wish Mr. Pelosi a quick return to health. And our regards and best wishes to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi as well, since it must be very difficult to see your husband attacked for someone coming for you. But let's just roll right out of that if we can and go right back into our fun stuff here, and that is Grateful Dead and good music all the time.
Yeah. Let's go back to a song that ends with the uncle getting killed. So let's go from political violence to Western violence, Larry.
Well, that's true, and you make a good point there, and I guess I hadn't really quite thought that all the way through before I did it. But yes, Me and My Uncle does, but somehow in Me and My Uncle, there's a little more poetic justice to what we're hearing about than some of the nonsense that's being thrown around here.
I don't know, man. I don't know. From one rogue to another, right? It's the passing of the torch from one outlaw that's a bad guy to teaching the other outlaw so well that he imitates the behavior. So, look, a fun song, but ultimately, I don't think there's any heroes in Me and My Uncle.
No, I think you're probably right, and all points well taken. And so, just so anyone doesn't think that we were trying to actually put this together like this song is picked not so much because of the murder that does take place at the penultimate moment of the song, but because this was just more of a great fun night of the boys just really kicking it back. They come out of Dark Star into drums, not a very long drum solo. This was still Bill Kreutzmann doing it all by himself. And then Bill gives his wonderful, thundering drum introduction to the other one. They go through, they play an absolutely electric other one that's all over the place. And then without skipping a beat, they dive right into Me and My Uncle. And, in the show notes that I read before I even listened to it, they said you really need to hear it to both comprehend and believe that the band in full other one mode continues its psychedelic exploration right on through Me and My Uncle. As someone on Archive says, it's almost as if the other one is playing Me and My Uncle, which is not only a cool as hell thought, but also a pretty accurate description of what transpired. Dan, go ahead and crank that for us, and then we'll come back and talk about it some more.
I let it go. Love my uncle, God rest his soul. He taught me good, Lord, taught me all I know. Taught me so well, so I grabbed that gold. And I left his dead out by the side of the road.
Now, I will say that in picking that section, I really like, as part of this idea that they're just kind of carrying the other one theme all the way through, it's really almost a seamless transition from a cowboy song right back into one of their all-time classic psychedelic rock songs. And it doesn't seem as like they slow down or they make any change. They just keep going. Earlier in the Me and My Uncle clip, or earlier in the song, you can really hear a much heavier influence of the other one kind of hanging over it the whole time. And, Rob, I just kind of chalked that up to, in 71, they were still doing a lot of experimenting. They were still, working new tunes in and trying to find a way for those new tunes of Americana, if we will, to fit in with the tunes that, were made famous during the Primal Dead era and, really have a much more, deep psychedelic, I should say, maybe psychological too, bent to them. And it's always fun to hear them try and take all of them and cram them together into one.
Yeah, for sure. And you always forget that I think statistically, I think Me and My Uncle was a song the Grateful Dead played more than any other song. So, that means that it was in the catalog all the way through. But whenever I think about Me and My Uncle, I always think it's one of those songs that actually has a definitive ending. It ends with a note. Oftentimes they take that ending note and go right into like a big river or a Mama Tried or a Mexicali or a Cumberland. There's certain songs that would flow out of Me and My Uncle really nicely to kind of keep with that same key and the same sort of, cowboyish theme. But, to do this transition, which is like as soon as it sort of ends, flow right into the other one, it's again, I think you and I love highlighting things that are out of the ordinary for Grateful Dead set lists, or just, more playful or experimentatory than others. And this is a great example of that. This is a classic 1971 moment of, sort of the end of the psychedelic era into the cowboy era, or the Americana era, and finding a way to fuse those two in the way that they played the Me and My Uncle, and the way they just came right out of it into the other one. So it's super cool.
I love it, and the second stanza of the other one, if you will, that they blow into as soon as they finish Me and My Uncle, is just as otherworldly, you might say. It's a brash. Now I'm reading the review. Brash roaring into the ether, throwing off stardust and cosmic sparks the entire way. So I don't know about you guys, but that's more than enough to convince me that on the drive home tonight I will be calling up Archive or re-listen and listening to this for a little while, because it's that good, and it's really worth it. Speaking of great music and great performances, Rob, did you hear that Jerry Harrison and Adrian Belew have announced tour dates for their unique performance of the Talking Heads' Remain in Light album?
I did, and I loved your comment when you actually sent me the notes on it. I'd just seen the announcement a few hours before that, but the idea of, is there anyone that Adrian Belew has not played with in terms of like prog rock, avant-garde, King Crimson-y, like, if you think about who he inspired, you think about like certain, guitar players being inspired by the Garcias of the world, but then you think about the guys from, like, let's say Humphreys, and you think Jake Sinninger and Brendan Bayliss probably being a lot more inspired by a guy like Adrian Belew than they were probably by Garcia. Adrian Belew is, for people that aren't familiar with this music, a really, really interesting player, and a very, very different player. And in terms of, like, setting the prog rock stage, it doesn't get any better. So it's a very cool collaboration. And anytime someone says they're going to go out and play the Talking Heads, I'm all about it. It doesn't matter, who's taking it on. I'm always happy to see them do it. So no, it's a super cool announcement, a great album, and it's a great collaboration.
It is. It's one of my all-time favorite non-Grateful Dead rock albums. I think it was so, instrumental in the changes it brought to, contemporary American rock at the time when, the Talking Heads released it. It's wonderful to have, Jerry Harrison as part of this, as one of the original guys. And we had a chance to see David Byrne's musical performance a year or two ago that does obviously feature a lot of Talking Head tunes. But this I almost kind of look at as like the difference between, David Byrne is the genius behind it all, or one of the big geniuses behind it all. But he kind of plays it his way. I kind of look at Jerry Harrison and Adrian Belew. They're just going to come out and rock out to it. And very, very excited to have an opportunity to go see that in February already of 2023. We're looking at seeing live music, but that's going to be a good one to be paying attention to and counting down the days. Very, very excited. And hopefully we'll get a whole group of fun concert goers together and strike out and do that and come back onto the show and talk all about it.
For sure. And look, I think Talking Heads are one of those bands where the frontman gets, too much of the attention, the way that, like, Pink Floyd, Roger Waters got so much attention. And you forget that, like, the Talking Heads without Tino Weymouth wouldn't have been the Talking Heads. And you forget that, like, there would be no Stop Making Sense without Bernie Worrell playing his Wurlitzer on that. And, you think about the most, like, iconic moments of Stop Making Sense. And I'd say Bernie contributes as much as anyone. David was kind of the creative genius in writing the music and setting a tempo. But that band as a band, I mean, if you were to say, like, pick any band at the peak of their power, the peak of their performance, who do you want to go back and see? And, like, obviously, like, the Bowies and the Queens pop up, but seeing the Talking Heads in 79 or 1980, like, that would have been as high on my list as absolutely anything that I could have seen, just because those guys as a band were just on fire. And it was, like, in 1983 when Stop Making Sense came out, it was kind of a culmination of, like, watching them get to that moment where they were just that innovative, that creative, and totally setting the stage of, like, rewriting what the New York sound was at the time. So you don't hear me that passionate about a lot of, like, non-jam bands, but the Talking Heads for me are one that if you could say, like, get them back together before their members start passing away and, get them back together one more time. If you were to say put one band back together right now, by far and away for me, it would be Talking Heads.
I would have to agree. It's the greatest band that I never got to see perform that was actually playing during an era when I was alive, and always regretted that I never caught one of their shows. poor timing, whatever it might have been. But I love your comment about all of the other musicians in the band who contribute so much. And of course, that has me thinking of the Tom Tom Club, right? Which both Jerry Harrison and for a while Adrian Belew were both a part of.
And Tina Weymouth.
And Tina Weymouth, exactly. It was basically the band without David Byrne, with a really great percussion beat. And that's one of my favorite parts of the Stop Making Sense show, where all of a sudden now we're going to have the Tom Tom Club, and they switch personnel around a little bit. They get a great Tom Tom Club performance, and now we're back to the Talking Heads, and it was seamless and it was great fun, and I love the Tom Tom Club too. Such great music, and I would agree with Rob. We don't often get so excited about non-jam band type bands, but if you have a chance to go see these guys, this should be one on your must-see list. And then just one last musical note, and then we'll look into saying goodbye to the Dead and the Boys. And it's unfortunately another sad note, but as we've been saying all along, as the years go by, unfortunately, this is going to become more and more common. But recently, the music world lost Robin Sylvester at the age of 72. Robin, in addition to being an all-around great rock bass player, was for a while the regular bass player for Rat Dog. In fact, he kind of followed in Rob Wasserman's footsteps, which quite frankly, are about as large a footsteps as you could ever have to fill in the rock world, but always did it in a way that endeared him to the band, endeared him to the band's fans. It's an unfortunate loss, and these days we can say at 72, it's an untimely loss.
Yeah, no, definitely sad to hear of his passing. A terrific bass player, terrific musician. So one that will be missed. And again, anytime that part of the sort of the Grateful Dead extended family loses a member, it's sad just because these guys they're all getting older, and it's not just the core members of the band, but it's the core members of the supporting bands, whether it's the Garcia Band or Rat Dog or any of the other incarnations that they've come up with over the years. So they'll be missed. And before we sign off, I'll give a more positive note in the music world right now. And if anyone didn't get a chance to see it, take a look at what Billy Strings pulled off the other night, which is sort of an ode to what Fish has done at Dick's Sporting Goods, for their annual Labor Day sort of weekends. But he spelled out the words "Thank You, Willie" with his song selection for the Willie Nelson show that he did the other night. So if you haven't had a chance to check out what Billy did, and if you also haven't had a chance to check out the video of his Halloween night performance where he's playing a lot of heavy metal tunes. Look, that guy is as real deal as they come. It's amazing to me how many different genres he can do. He's not just a bluegrass musician, but you want to talk about someone that just can run the gamut of playing different stuff. Billy is slaying it right now. He's absolutely slaying it. And so I'd recommend pull the video of his Halloween performance and definitely go check out the Thank You, Willie show as well. So hats off to Billy Strings for really carrying the torch of the next wave of true, right there with Derek Trucks, right there with Trey, right there with some of the other younger guys, the John Mayers of the world, that Jack Whites, that are just that good at their craft. Billy Strings is so sick right now.
Okay, so Rob, I'm going to throw this right back at you then, because it turns out that Adrian Belew and Jerry Harrison are bringing their Remain in Light tour to Chicago on February 25th. The very next day, February 26th, Billy Strings is playing at the Ryman Theater in Nashville. And I'm sitting here having a discussion with my wife about whether we want to stay in Chicago and see Remain in Light, or whether we want to take advantage to go down to Nashville and see Billy Strings. And, for somebody just walking in and listening to you talk about both of those groups, that's a pretty hard decision to make.
It's an easy decision to make. You'll see Billy Strings for the next 20 years. You're not going to see Adrian Belew playing with Harrison for much longer. Seize the moment, see the one that's fleeting. We've got years of Billy. Go see the Talking Head show.
Bless you. That's all I'm going to say. And not that it matters. Alex said the exact same thing. So there you go, man. We've got this locked down. Excellent. Love that answer.
Awesome. Well, listen, that's all I've got. I'll leave with my advice on what music to see for you, Larry. But I'm excited to see you in person in a couple of weeks. Excited to see Dan Humiston. But from Southern California, I'll say my goodbyes right now. Another fun episode, and thanks for curating some great music for us today. That was a super cool show to pick out.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun, and I really like it. We're going to leave you, which on the set list would be called Playing in the Band, a tune you're all familiar with. But what I've done here is closing the same way we opened. The boys were having so much fun this night that they couldn't stop the banter. And so now we're going to hear on our way out a little more of their craziness up on stage, a joke that modern people might be able to relate to the band REO Speedwagon, or maybe not. But either way, listen to the boys, have a good time. Thank you for listening. As always, we appreciate it. Please go out and vote, and enjoy your cannabis responsibly. Talk to you next week.
Hey, for you radio listeners, this is what's known as dead air.
Get it? Who's the kid looking for? Here's a good-looking little kid. Somebody's kid. Looking for somebody named Joni. Okay, well, whoever Joni is, your kid is up here and everything is all right.
Anybody know any good jokes? Huh?
Thanks for listening to today's show. To check out more great cannabis podcasts, go to PodConx.com. Here's a preview of one of our other shows.
Hey there, my name is Leah Babrudi, and I'm the founder and host of CannaChicks Podcast, where I discuss cannabis, psychedelics, and other natural medicines. I not only interview people who use them as treatment for different conditions, but also the entrepreneurs who share their knowledge on how they built their businesses. If this sounds interesting to you, give my show a listen. I'm sure you'll learn something that'll surprise you.